You'll never know how much I really love you. You'll never know how much I really care. Listen, do you want to know a secret? Do you promise not to tell? Whoa, whoa, closer. Let me whisper in your ear. Say the words you long to hear. I'm in love with you. Ooh. Listen. Do you want to know a secret? Do you promise not to tell? Whoa, whoa, closer. Let me whisper in your ear. Say the words you long to hear. I'm in love with you. Ooh. I've known a secret for a week or two. Nobody knows, just we two. Listen, do you want to know a secret? Do you promise not to tell? Whoa, whoa, closer. Let me whisper in your ear. Say the words you long to hear. I'm in love with you. Yeah, the Beatles. Do you want to know a secret? Well, you turned into the right place. Hold on, let me get my right screen up here. There we go. Get back into my studio. Hey, thanks so much for stopping by. Tonight on Wednesdays with Wendell Live, we're talking about the Beatles, the secrets of the Beatles. Now, okay, if you're a real Beatle fan, I'm going to tell you right up front, there's no secrets you don't know. So you know most of the stuff already. But those of you maybe casual Beatle fans, you're going to find out some stuff tonight that you didn't know about. This is a group of 4 unknown kids. They were 15, 16, 17 when they first got together. They just wanted to start a band like all kids at 15 or 16 years old. And they ended up changing the world. They changed the music world, only in a matter of about 7 years, as a matter of fact. We're going to be talking about how they got started, maybe some, and we're going to talk about some Beatle fun facts. We're also going to be talking about things you never knew and life after the Beatles. What's happened to the 4 Beatles since the band broke up in 1969? And of course, we'll sing a few Beatle tunes. I got some karaoke in there because I know you want to sing too at home, and sometimes you don't know the words, sort of like me. So enough of this. Grab your mop top, get your Chelsea boots, go find your favorite Beatle album, and let's get this show on the road. You'll never know how much sorry about that. But, so hey, what's been going on? I always like to say a little bit about what's happening in my life here, because I know you're all worried about me. So, well, it's been a busy 2 weeks. I was up in Maine and did some stuff up in Maine. It was still cold up there, trust me. The weather lady came on Saturday and said, well, we're going to have a mild day today. It's going to get up to 40. A mild day. Okay, great. But I do want to let you know, if you're all spun up with this COVID-19 stuff, this is a CDC-approved program. You can watch this show. You will not get a virus from it. You might get some fun at the end of the show. So there you go. I did post a new video. If you haven't seen it yet, Cold Beer Conversation. Had fun with that. Put myself in there twice. And if you didn't notice, March is half over. I think, what is today, the 18th? Tomorrow around 11:50 something at night, spring comes. And so here it comes. Here comes spring. And you know what that means? think I mentioned this last time when I was here. I've got to get the crazy lawnmower out and start doing all that stuff. So let me stop by and see who's in the chat real quick. Jelly Duck, thanks for coming by. Susan, great to see you. Bob, great to have you come on board. Let's see who else we got here. Let's see. Rick, good to see you, Rick. And so glad Jelly Duck could make it. You know, if you don't know Jelly Duck, aren't you like over in Beirut? Is that right? I know he's over in the Mediterranean area somewhere. So it's got to be like early in the morning for him. So Jelly Duck, thanks so much for coming by. So if you are listening and you're not in the chat, you know, you can join the chat. If you're not familiar how to do this, because I know some people aren't familiar with it, you log into YouTube. Well, how do I log into YouTube? Well, log into YouTube using your Google account. If you have a Google account, you should have a Google account. Most people do. Sign in, and once you sign in, you can start chatting. We'd love to hear from you. Love to know who's out there, because I'd like to welcome everybody who's come by. And so one thing to think about. Also, if you haven't subscribed, some people think it costs money to subscribe. It does not cost any money to subscribe, okay? Only subscribing allows you to get notices when the creator, such as me, posts a video and you know what's going on. So enough of the commercial, enough of that. Let's get into the show and talk a little bit about the Beatles, as I said we were going to. And how in the world did the Beatles start? I mentioned this to you a little bit earlier. You know, they were an English rock band, if you didn't know, from Liverpool. And they really formed their core band around 1960. Now, they'd been together. George and Paul and John had been together before that. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But they were really integral in the development of the 1960s counterculture and the pop music that came out during that area. They really changed during the 10 years, 7 to 10 years. If you listen to the music from the very first song, which I'm going to tell you what that was, to the very last song, they really had a change. By the time they broke up 10 years later, they had explored so many music styles. They had done ballads, they had done Indian music, and they'd done psychedelic and hard rock. They'd done about everything. So in March 1957, I was born then. Yes, I was. John Lennon, he was 16 years old. Now think of this, 16 years old. This is the thing. Now, 16 years old is about freshman, sophomore in school, okay? So he's 16 years old. He started the skiffle band with some friends from his high school. And a skiffle band is like blues and jazz, folk music, and they use all different types of instruments. So that's what a skiffle band is. They first called themselves the Blackjacks. Well, that didn't last very long because they found out somebody else in Liverpool had that name, and they went to the Quarry something high school in Liverpool. So they ended up calling themselves the Quarrymen. That was after their high school name. So if you've heard them some of you heard them called the Quarrymen. That's why they were called the Quarrymen, is because that's where John and his buddies from high school went. So John met Paul. As a matter of fact, Paul saw the Quarrymen play, went up, started talking to John, and started as the rhythm guitarist when he was about 15 years old. So again, think of this. 15 years old, these two guys are getting together. One's 16, one's 15. 57, 58. In February of 58, McCartney asked his friend, George, to come watch the band. So he did. Well, John really didn't like him. John thought he was too young for the band. Now, keep this in mind. They're 16 years old. They thought he was too young to be in the band. But after the second meeting, they invited George to come on board to be the lead guitarist. They really liked the way George played lead guitar, which, if you put yourself into this time warp thing, in 1957, rock music, electric guitars were just getting established, okay, in bands. So there weren't a lot of lead guitarists. So these three lead guitarists, they now call themselves Johnny, because of John Johnny and the Moondogs, and they would play the rock and roll music anytime they could find a drummer. They didn't have a regular drummer. A friend of theirs, Stuart Sutcliffe. Stuart Sutcliffe joined the band in 1960, and he was their bass player. As a matter of fact, Sutcliffe is the one who suggested they call themselves the Beatles. As a matter of fact, that was because at the time there was Buddy Holly and the Crickets, and so they said, hey, let's be Johnny and the Beatles. So they used this name, the Beatles, for a while, for about 5 months, and then they changed it to the Silver Beatles. They used that for about 2 months. Then they went back and shortened the name again to the Beatles, and they changed the spelling to Beatles, because in the beginning it was Beatles, like Beetles, the bug. And that was John's idea to change it to the Beatles, spelled that way. They built their reputation playing around in Liverpool and Hamburg, Germany, for about 3 years. As I said, they went through a group of drummers, and including Pete Best. Everybody remember who's Pete Best. Before asking Ringo Starr to join them in 1962. Sutcliffe, the guy that was playing bass, he left the band in 1961 because he wanted to pursue a career as a painter, an artist. Unfortunately, Stuart passed away at the age 21 of a brain hemorrhage while he was in school. But he is credited for giving them the name the Beatles. So I want to talk to you about their first single. So they had 2 first singles. Now, how can you have 2 first singles? Well, because their first single, which was Love Me Do, was released in the United Kingdom. And that was in 1962. And it went to number 17 in the UK charts. That was their first single. But in the United States, well, first of all, it was released 2 years later in the United States and became number 1. I'm going to hold off on the other. How can you have 2 first songs here for a second? So it is interesting to note that Ringo was part of the band at the time when they were doing Love Me Do, but George Martin didn't like his drumming, so they brought in a quote, professional drummer to drum on Love Me Do. So the very first single that they released, Ringo was part of the band, but he didn't play on the drums. He didn't like his drumming. But by 1964, these guys are 21, 22, 23 years old. I can't even remember that, okay? They were international stars. They were leading the British invasion of the United States. And they were in the pop market breaking records like you wouldn't believe. Not those type of records, but breaking records. So let's talk about this other song. So how could you have 2 first singles? Well, their first single, Love Me Do, was released in the United Kingdom. In the United States, their very first song that they released was Please Please Me. And it was released in February 63, didn't do very well. And so they re-released it in January 1964. The first time it released, it didn't chart. The second time, it did chart. It was, again, the first song ever released in the United States by the Beatles. Another interesting fact is the song was originally turned down by Capitol Records and Atlantic Records. And I think Decca Records at the time told them that guitar bands are on their way out. Obviously, that was a mistake. But VJ Records did agree to sign them, and signed them on February 7th, 1963, which was exactly 1 year before they got off the plane in the United States to really, what's the right word, to attack America, so to speak. So one last fun fact. The pressing of the VJ single had a typographical error. It spelled the Beatles with 2 T's. And so if you can find this VJ record with 2 T's in it, you got yourself a rare one. They're very valuable items. However, they was quickly found, and it was quickly found out, and they corrected the problem. But enough of that. So Please Please Me, let's talk about that. Oh, let's sing it.
Last night
said these words to my girl. I know you never even try, girl. Come on, 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 come on. Please, please me, oh yeah, like I please you. You don't need me to show the way, love. Why do I always have to say love? Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Please, please me, oh yeah, like I please you. I don't wanna sound complaining, but you know there's always rain in my heart. In my heart, I do all the pleasing with you. It's so hard to reason with you. Oh yeah, why do you make me blue? Last night I said these words to my girl. I know you never even try, girl. Come on, 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 come on. Please, please me, oh yeah, like I please you. Oh yeah, like I please you. Oh yeah, like I please you. The Beatles, please, please me. Oh, let's have a stop and take a look, see who's joined us in the chat. Jelly Duck, yes, sir. Let's see if there's anybody new. Yeah, Dennis said he's going to watch later. I think he had something else tonight. So this is a popular night. But Susan, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I could do these Beatles songs all night long. So let's see. Okay. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Next, let's move on. So I promised you some fun facts, right? So let's talk about some fun facts. Even I learned some stuff in this. Hold on, my mic cord's all tangled up. There we go. Okay. So the Beatles, if you didn't know, they are the best-selling band in history. EMI records state that they've sold over 1 billion units worldwide. They've sold more units than any other artist. As of 2015, which is the earliest records I could find, they hold the record for the most #1 hits on the Hot 100 chart with 20. Amazing. The group was inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Oh, what a surprise, right? Back in 1988. All 4 members were also individually eventually into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So as the Beatles, they got in, and as individual artists. It's just amazing when you read the stories about Paul and John and how they could just get together and say, hey, let's write a song about this. And in a matter of an hour or two, they'll have a new song. And it becomes a hit. They received 10 Grammy Awards. The first lyrics of Yesterday. Does anybody know what the first lyrics of Yesterday are? I'll come back to this to see if anybody knows. Not the first lyrics, but I mean the first title. What was the first title of Yesterday? What did Paul originally call Yesterday? So I'll hold off on giving an answer on that, just in case somebody knows. So you've listened to today's music, right? And whether you like the music or not, I've always listened to the lyrics. I mean, to me, I want to hear what the story is in the song. And let me just tell you, some of the stories in the songs right now are not stories that I grew up with or stories that we talked about. However, back in 1965, 66, I believe, the BBC band I Am a Walrus Why did they ban I Am a Walrus? Because of its lyrics. It had a pornographic lyrics. What in the hell are pornographic lyrics in I Am a Walrus? Oh, he sings, "Let your knickers down." Now, can you imagine that today? Amazing. Just amazing. I'm sorry. Okay, let's see. Anybody, let's have a look here. Anybody guess? I did not see anybody in the chat guessing what the first title of yesterday was. Well, first of all, yesterday is the most, that's the right word, the most covered song of all. So yesterday is. On here while I get a drink. So its original title was Scrambled Eggs. Scrambled eggs, you said? How in the world did he come up with scrambled eggs for a title that ended up being called Yesterday? Well, he woke up one morning and he got this song in his head. He got this tune in his head. Scrambled eggs, da 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 da, right? And so he didn't want to lose that tune. So he walked around the house in the morning just humming scrambled eggs, baby, I love scrambled eggs. So he wouldn't forget the tune. Fortunately, the title of the song never became Scrambled Eggs. It became Yesterday. Again, one of the most covered tune ever. Okay, so some of you probably know the song Norwegian Wood. You know Norwegian Wood? Hear that song? I once had a girl, and should I say, she once had me. That song, right? Norwegian Wood. What in the world is he talking about? Norwegian Wood. Is that like a place? You know, Norwegian Wood, is that a place? No. Back in the 60s, it was not very uncommon for single ladies who lived in an apartment or lived by themselves to furnish their apartments with this type of furniture that was made in Scandinavia out of some very cheap pine, and anything that was that type of material, they ended up calling Norwegian Wood. So he's really talking about the furniture in this lady's apartment that's calling it Norwegian Wood. So if you can imagine, if he'd written the song today, he would have called it IKEA furniture. So, so that's exactly what it is. So Norwegian Wood, he's really talking about the furniture in her house, and if you listen to the lyrics, he actually burns it up at the end of the song. What about the song? I think who was here? Who said this on here? Was it Rick talking about Sgt. Pepper, or Bob? Bob was talking about Sgt. Pepper. On the Sgt. Pepper album, there's a song called "For the Benefit of Mr. Kite." So where did this come from? Where did this title "For the Benefit of Mr. Kite"? Well, John was in the recording studio. They took a break, and he went shopping. He went down the street to this antique shop, and they had these old signs there. And there was an old poster there for this circus called, but on it was advertising "For the Benefit of Mr. Kite." And so he took this poster and put it up in his room and kept it there for a while. And eventually he wrote a song for the benefit of Mr. Kite. And all the people that were mentioned on the poster are in the song. So again, I'm just amazed that, I can't do this, and that's what it is. I'm just amazed how these guys can take something and say, I can make a song out of that. So speaking of this, okay, another fun fact. I got two more for you. So, Nowhere Man. Song, I believe it's on the Rubber Soul album. Nowhere Man. He's a real nowhere man sitting in his nowhere land. That song, okay? So how did John come up with this song, Nowhere Man? Well, here's what happened. they were putting this album together, Rubber Soul, and he had been struggling for 5 hours trying to come up with a song because they needed another song for the Rubber Soul album. So you know how the advice is sometimes just let it go sit down, go take a rest. So he did. So he went down, he sat down, laid down, rested for a little bit, and he just started thinking in his head. He just said to himself, I'm so frustrated. I'm coming up with nothing. Look at me. I'm just a nowhere man sitting in this nowhere land. And all of a sudden, when he said this to himself, the music just flowed out. He's just sitting there going, I'm just a nowhere man going nowhere. I've said that to myself sometimes. But I didn't make a hit song out of it. So after he did that, boom, song came out. So there you go. Before I get to the next fun fact, I just want to check the chat real quick, see if we got anybody I need to say hi to. You guys are talking. That's good. Keep it up. Excellent. If you haven't, if you like the show, please give me a thumbs up. It does help my channel. Gets me a little thumbs up there. I do enjoy that, or it does. I do appreciate that. Okay, so Hard Day's Night. Most people know, if you're a Beatles fan, on the fringes even, you may know how the song Hard Day's Night came about. And it really came from Ringo. I mean, how did this title come about? So they had been in the recording session all day. And as a matter of fact, it went so long that it was nighttime by the time they finished. And so when it was all over, Ringo says, boy, that was a hard day, night. Meaning, it was a hard day, night. And all of a sudden, they pick it up and they go, that not only is the title of the next movie or next album, we're going to write a song about that. So that's how Hard Day's Night came about. But another one that's a little more unknown is 8 Days a Week. Where did 8 Days a Week come from? And as I told you, these guys picked up this stuff and could write a song about anything. So 8 days a week, Paul was getting a ride with a chauffeur to go see John. They were going to be, they're working on an album. And so Paul gets in the car and says to him, so hey, how's it been going? How are things with you? And the chauffeur says, oh, I've been working hard 8 days a week. Another title for a song. So 8 days a week came from a chauffeur that Paul was riding with. So the song 8 Days a Week came out in 1965. It was their seventh. This is 1965. They only started in the U.S. in 64. This was their seventh #1 hit. And they were all, as I said, all within a 12-month period. Also, this is the first time, if you listen to the beginning of this song, we're going to do this song in a second here. If you listen to the beginning of this song, it's the first pop song that ever had a fade-in start the song. It was 8 days a week. It happened to be the 8th #1 song of the year for 1965. So with that, let's do this song. The Beatles, 8 Days a Week. Ooh, I need your love, babe. Guess you know it's true. Hope you need my love, babe. Just like I need you. Hold me, love me. Hold me, love me. Ain't got nothing but love, babe. 8 days a week. Love you every day, girl. Always on my mind. One thing I can say, girl. Love you all the time. Yeah, you can't do those songs without the bowing at the end. It just sort of like comes natural for some reason. Oh, that's a fun song. I enjoy that one. Oh. Yes. 8 days a week. So I'm going to talk a little bit here, but in the background, I want to play my one little feature video I have that I did a little while back. As a matter of fact, if you haven't seen this yet, here we go. This is my video I posted on my channel. Because, every other Wednesday I actually post a video that I produce. I try to make it entertaining. I try to make it more than just some random guy standing in front of a microphone singing. And so I try to make them entertaining and do the best I can. It's just, as a matter of fact, I'm the director, I'm the producer, I'm the writer, I'm the talent, I'm the videographer, I'm the editor. I do everything. So, but if you haven't seen this, I had fun with it. I was able to put me in it 2 other times as with some backup singers in there. And I think they come. And I got that same shirt on. I was supposed to wear a yellow shirt tonight, but it didn't work well, so I wore the black one instead. So that guy looks familiar. And I still have that Russian hat, if you're interested. But where I was headed on this, if you haven't seen it, please go see it. I could use a few more views. Love to get a little more views on that if I could. I call this the crazy dancing Russian guy. So, this was one of my favorite songs to do. As a matter of fact, real quickly, I'll give you my 10 minutes of fame I had in Nashville. I was in Nashville maybe 10, 15 years ago now, and I was there with a group of friends, and there was a band playing up front, as they do in Nashville, out there on Broadway. And I'm standing in the back talking to somebody, and all of a sudden somebody yells, "Hey, where's Wendell? Get Wendell up here!" So a friend of mine gone up there and knew the guitarist in the band. They get me up there. Here's this country band that plays country music, and they look at me and they go, "So what song you want to do?" And I go, "Well, back in the USSR." And they all look at each other like, "We've never done it, but I think we can do it." Sure enough, those guys could play Back in the USSR like they played it 50 million times. So that's my little 15 minutes of fame. That later, at the end of it, they said, "Hey, could you do it? Do you want to do another one?" I said, "How about Johnny Be Good?" Had the same reaction. They'd never played it, but you could tell, I don't think we can pull it off. And sure enough, they did. So it was my 15 minutes of fame in Nashville. So. This song here, let's talk a little bit about the song. So this song came out in '68, and that's when all this Russia, Cold War stuff was going on, USSR, and so on. And as a matter of fact, Chuck Berry did a song called "Back in the USA." And so Paul decided that he was going to do this song as a parody. He said, "It's back in the USA. How about Back in the USSR?" So it was intended to be a fun tune that they had done. And they really did it from the point of view of a Russian spy returning to USSR after the extended mission in the United States. As a matter of fact, one little fun fact to this is that Ringo did not play on this. They did this as a threesome. Ringo had left the group temporarily because Paul had made some comments about his drumming, and he basically said, blah, 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 and left. He eventually, as you know, came back. They created the drum track with some composite. They created the drums using a drum track over a number of takes. And let's see, Back in the USSR is number 85 in the 100 greatest Beatles songs ever. So there you go, a little fun fact on Back in the USSR. Anything else going on in the chat? Any questions for? Hey, Dennis, glad you could make it. We were all missing you, so glad you could come by, Dennis. If you have any questions about the Beatles, please ask. I might know the answer, so please feel free. And okay, so let's go on to the next segment, which is things you never knew about the Beatles. Okay. So some of this, again, if you're a real Beatles fan, you're going to know some of this stuff because it's hard after 60 years now. Can you imagine 60 years? It's hard to have any secrets, okay? Speaking of 60 years, I saw Paul McCartney in concert in the mid-2000s, like 2006 or so, 2005, 2006, sometime in that area. So the guy is probably at the time late 60s, I believe. Is when I saw him. He still had it. The guy's amazing. So one of the best concerts I ever went to. So things you never knew about the Beatles. Let's talk about that. So Ringo. Anybody know what Ringo's real name is? Wait a second or two, see if anybody comes up with what Ringo's real name is. So Ringo's real name is Richard Starkey. As a matter of fact, his mother calls him Richie, or used to call him Richie. He began playing the drums in a hospital band at the age of 13. I remember this. We were talking before they were 15 and 16, the two guys, John and Paul, when they were doing the guitar. And now Ringo is 13. But he's always been known as Ringo. And but you can hear, if you listen to some of the studio recording takes, you can hear Paul calling out saying, "Are you ready, Richard?" Okay, so even though on the albums and in the movies and so on, they called him Ringo, and in public relations, they still called him Richard. He got his first name Rings because he used to wear a lot of rings on it, jewelry on his fingers. And he went to a holiday camp once, and they were calling him Rings. Hey, Rings, which makes sense. Okay, hey, Rings, because he had all these rings on. Well, he changed it to Ringo because it sounded more cowboyish. So that's how he got the name. He gave it to himself, called him Ringo. So John grew up near a place called, anybody? Bueller? Strawberry Fields. From the time that he was 5 years old, Lennon lived with his aunt and uncle because his parents pretty much left him. One of his favorite spots to explore was the Salvation Army orphanage that was close by, and they had a sort of I won't call it a park, a quad, whatever, called Strawberry Fields, and John wrote that song Strawberry Fields in 1966 when he was in a reminiscent mood. So. Strawberry Fields Forever is not the only song named for a real place. Lennon's family home in Liverpool was near Penny Lane. I'm sure you know the song Penny Lane. As a matter of fact, the street sign Penny Lane has been stolen so many times that they've stopped replacing it, and they've just painted Penny Lane on the buildings. So I have to tell you a secret. Won't be a secret anymore. But remember, I was younger, so I was younger than them when they came out. It took me forever to realize Penny Lane was not a person. Okay, I thought Penny Lane was a person at first. And then I realized, oh, he's talking about a street. Okay, a place. Oh, well. That's what happens when you're younger. So Paul's dad was a musician. He was a trumpet player, as a matter of fact. Also a pianist, and he led a jazz band in the 20s. And he bought a piano. Of course, back in those days, not everybody, but many people had a piano because that was the only way you could get any entertainment. And encouraged Paul to play it. Well, Paul never he did take piano lessons, but he ended up learning the piano himself and learned by just figuring things out because he wasn't into lessons. But at the age of 11, he auditioned for the local Liverpool Cathedral Choir, and he was not accepted, and so he ended up joining another church's choir. He received a trumpet from his father for his 14th birthday but when rock and roll started getting popular when he was around 14, he traded it in and got himself an acoustic guitar. So you may know this, Paul and Ringo, as a matter of fact, is left-handed. And after he saw a poster of Slim Whitman in concert, realizing that Whitman was playing left-handed, he took the strings and put them in reverse order so he could play it better. And remember what I said? By the age of 15, he was already in a band with John. Just amazing. Okay. So George invented the Megastar rock benefit concert. Back in the early 70s, George found out about the plight of the Bangladesh refugees. They're both victims of war and starvation, a devastating cyclone. And George felt compelled to devote himself to the cause. He recruited people like Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, Ringo, Billy Preston, Badfinger, Leon Russell, and together they sold two sold-out shows in Madison Square Garden in 1971 called The Concert for Bangladesh. I still remember that. George then arranged to release a concert album and a film and raised over $12 million, and with all the money going to UNICEF. So that's some facts that you didn't know about the Beatles. Try to pick something of every one of them. The next part, our next segment, before we get there, just want to again stop by and see if there's anybody. Hey, Shadow Black, thanks for coming by. Yeah, what is everybody's favorite Beatles song? And I'm with Dennis. Boy, it's hard to pick one, isn't it? There's a lot of songs that I enjoy. You know, there's songs that I call my favorite based on the mood I'm in. In a happy mood, reminiscent mood. Pretty much, if you remember Mr. Peabody. You remember Mr. Peabody from Bullwinkle? He had this thing called the Wayback Machine. It was a little cartoon about history. But music is like the perfect Wayback Machine. You hear a song and it takes you someplace. You don't even have to go. So, but now, here's a song that I thought everybody would like. And it's some karaoke, time for you to sing. I'm going to have the words up here for you. Which one is it? Here Comes the Sun. So, Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. This is written by George. I'll tell you a little bit about it after the song is over.
Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Little darling, the smiles returning to the faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, it's all right. It's all right.
Here Comes the Sun and the Beatles. Good song. So I told you I would share some info about that. So this song was "Here Comes the Sun." "Here Comes the Sun" was written in 1969, and George was supposed to have been at the Abbey Road Studios for some business meetings. Well, the last things any of these guys liked were business meetings, talking about contracts and accounting stuff and so on. So he decided not to go, and he ended up visiting with his friend Eric Clapton, and this was Eric Clapton's house. They were sitting in a field and saw the sun, and again the song just came to him. It's one of George's best songs, and it also proved to the public that George could write just as well as John and Paul could. It is the most streamed Beatles song in the United Kingdom with over 50 million plays. So, Here Comes the Sun. Susan, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to be under the sea. That was a good song, too. As a matter of fact, it's not on this album, but it made me think of Yellow Submarine. It's the only movie I didn't have. I finally got it the other day, so I do have Yellow Submarine. So, okay, we're coming into the final stretch here. I want to thank everybody for sticking around. We got one more segment here, one more song, and then we'll let you get back to your Wednesday. But I want to thank everybody for coming by. So, life after the Beatles. What happened to the Beatles afterwards? One thing I didn't put in my notes that I wanted to let everybody know, at least I don't think I put it in my notes here. You know, Disney is like the happiest place on earth, right? That's what people say. It's the happiest place on earth. Well, it just so happens that John Lennon was at a Disney resort hotel in Orlando when he signed the final letter terminating the Beatles. So, just another tidbit that you probably weren't aware of. But after the life after the Beatles, all four Beatles released solo albums in 1970. Their solo albums sometimes involved one or more of the other Beatles, but they never included all of them. Ringo's 1973 album called Ringo, which I remember buying, was the only album to include compositions and performances of all four Beatles on the album, but at separate songs. So they all four showed up on the album, but they weren't all four together. From 68 to 72, John produced more than a dozen records with Ono. He had 4 top 10 singles: Give Peace a Chance, Instant Karma, and Imagine, and Happy Christmas, War is Over. Now, more about John real quickly here. As you know, he was very controversial. He was a peace activist. He was he had a lot of open thoughts about politics. And after moving to New York City in 1971, he was very critical of the Vietnam War. And this resulted of a 3-year attempt by the Nixon administration to try to deport him, which never happened. In 1975, Lennon disengaged from music for about 5 years so he could raise his son, Julian. Julian had a short career. But he returned in 1980. Excuse me, it was his son, Sean, sorry. In 1980, he returned with Ono and did the Double Fantasy album and released that. And as you probably know, John was shot and killed in the archway of his Manhattan apartment building by someone who claimed he was a Beatles fan, Mark Chapman, on December 8th, 1980, and it happened to be 3 weeks after the release of his album. He was only 40 years old. Still amazing that happened. George began recording his own songs, and that eventually would become of the album All Things Must Pass, and that came out in 1970, just weeks after the Beatles broke up. It was a triple album and released in late November, along with My Sweet Lord, which was the first single from that album. And both the album and the single made it to the tops of the charts. He was the first ex-Beatle. George was the first ex-Beatle to simultaneously have a top single and a top album on the charts. In 1988, George formed a band called the Traveling Wilburys. They were a platinum-selling supergroup. It featured guest guitars from Badfinger, Ronnie Wood, Billy Preston, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton. Ringo was on there, Tom Petty. Rolling Stones ranked George number 11 in all-time guitarists of all time. George died from lung cancer in 2001. He was only 58. It was 2 years after he survived a knife attack by an intruder in his Friar Park home. He left us an estate of almost $125 million. So after the band broke up in 1970, Ringo released several successful singles on his own. It Don't Come Easy, Photograph, You're 16. His most successful UK single was one called Back Off Boogaloo, which peaked at number 2. I happen to have all these songs, if you're wondering, and got them originally when they first came out. He achieved some commercial and critical success with his 1973 album, which I talked about earlier, which was Ringo, and has been featured in many documentaries. Rolling Stone named him the 5th greatest drummer of all time. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as I mentioned. Ringo is 79 years old. He is still touring today. He's worth $350 million. Wow. And the last one, Paul. In 1970, he had his own, album and started the band Wings, if you remember that. And they were successful, one of the most successful bands for about a decade, with over 12 top 10 singles and albums. He began another solo career in 1980, and since 1989, he's been touring consistently as a solo artist. And he's pretty has a lot of interest in international charities such as animal rights, seal hunting, landmines, vegetarianism, poverty, music education. Paul is one of the most successful composers and performers of all time. He has written or co-written 32 songs that have reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. He's also one of the wealthiest musicians in the world, an estimated fortune of $730 million. He's 77 years old right now. So, wow. It's amazing. So let's talk about one of Paul's songs. Song called Blackbird. We're going to do Blackbird here in a second. We wanted to pick something that was a little different, a little slower, something that everybody might know. It was released in November '68. In this song, if you listen to the song in his original recording, you hear this tap, 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 tap. And what that is Paul's leather shoe tapping, because this song is just Paul. There's nobody else in it. It's just Paul. So you can hear you distinctly hear his tapping of his foot. Blackbird is one of the top 10 most recorded songs ever. So, let me get a drink of water and take a look at the chat real quick. Hey, Shadow Black, thanks for stopping by. Great to see you. Is there anybody else I missed? Okay. One more song, and there we go.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night, Take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of the dark black night. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of the dark black night. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise.
Blackbird, the Beatles. There you go. Oh, well, that's the show. I hope you learned something tonight. I hope you had fun. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, I am always looking for feedback. I would love to hear what you think about the show. Do you like the format? Is there something else you'd like to see? Would you like to see it do it differently? Am I providing you too much information? I have to admit, on the Beatles, I sort of went overboard because I really like them and I enjoy their story. But love to hear your feedback. So please don't be shy. Put something in the chat there. I'd love to hear, or reach out to me individually. As you see, if you saw, you can reach me on Twitter and reach me on Instagram. If you haven't liked the video, please do. I got a new video coming out on Monday. Request by my daughter Madeline. And let's see if there's anybody else in here that go. So a couple things I want to say before I sign off. As I said, let me know what you think. If you're interested, follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Please like the video. And if you are so inclined, please share, and love to have you subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Now, the next show, I was supposed to be traveling, but as you know, most people aren't traveling right now. And the next show is supposed to be April 1st. So let me find my little chart. Well, I don't want to put the chart up yet because I think the music starts. I got to get one without the music. Yes. I don't have it this time. So, so the next show is supposed to be April 1st. If I don't travel, it's going to be April 1st. If I have to travel, the next show will be April 15th. So just keep your eye on my channel. You'll get a notification if you subscribed and you've clicked the bell. I'll get a thumbnail out early if it's going to be April 1st. But I think I'm probably going to do that show, but I can't tell you yet because I don't know what's going on with traveling. But again, everybody, thanks for coming by. It's great having you here. What a great community YouTube has. And as I've always said, if you can choose to be something, choose to be kind. We'll hope to see you in a couple weeks. Have a great weekend, everybody.